The intro was a lie. I don't care about Bluetooth tracking, not super interested in that. But for those of you who are interested in privacy and Bluetooth and tracking, there will be a little bit in here about that. All right, a little bit about me, obligatory slide. I spend the majority of my time working on a nonprofit I started where we release free as in beer, free as in freedom, open source, open access computer security trainings. These are the exact same trainings that you can go take from me for thousands of dollars, or you can just go take it for free online. I'd prefer you go take it for free online because I want more impact, not more money. I want more people to know what I know. So go check that out. A bunch of other people have contributed classes as well. But there's no such thing as workahol, and I'm not a workaholic, but I am an accomplishaholic. And it's good to have small little things to do to get that accomplishahol. And so 25% of my time I do consulting and research and just fun stuff, and this talk today is about that. And I see that I left it off my bio because I'm not one to sit on my laurels, but if it helps you for credibility's sake, before I started the nonprofit, I worked at Apple from 2015 to 2020 as the lead of the firmware security team. So Apple went from the worst firmware security, because they didn't even have Secure Boot back in 2015, to the best firmware security, and there they stay. Very happy to see so many people rocking Macs, including the presenters. When I first started going to security conferences in '99, you would be laughed off the stage if you were running a Mac. But again, they've improved massively since then. Now, about me a little more personally, I'm from approximately there in the United State of Minnesota. And specifically, that is the state that has the highest number, absolute number, about 1.6 million people of Scandinavian descent, of which I count myself as one. Had a Norwegian great-grandma, not great-great-grandma. So yeah, like, I come from fake Scandinavia, and when I came here, I wanted to, do the sort of Nordic thing and compare our levels of suffering. Because if you come from a place that's fundamentally hostile to human life and where you die if you go outside in the winter, if you don't have the right clothes on, you know that suffering builds strength, right? And so we like to compare our levels of suffering to compare our relative strength. And unfortunately, the data is pretty unambiguous on this. The highs where I'm from don't even reach the lows where you're from, if you're from here, in December and January. And, personally, I was looking at this number in Fahrenheit because this means nothing to me. But I said, that doesn't really meet with my lived experience. And so then I looked at the diagram a little more closely. The thin dotted lines are the corresponding perceived temperature. So -27, that much more matches with my experience. Also, just because I'm from the very middle of the continent, they like to send polar vortexes down at us. So it's a really terrible place to live. I don't recommend it. All right, so now that I've either enamored or alienated my audience, let's talk about Bluetooth. Coincidentally, a technology of Scandinavian descent. So in this research, what I want to know is any given Bluetooth device, there's thousands in this room right now, any given Bluetooth device, what Bluetooth chip, what silicon is it running? So pick some random devices, a Tesla, an Apple, a camera, or a hotel door lock. I want to know what chip is in it. Now, I happen to know that Teslas have Texas Instruments, Broadcom in Apple, except they just finally released the Apple first-party Bluetooth Wi-Fi chip with these most recent ones. That's great. And Silicon Labs in that. But if I encounter some random device, like a hotel door lock, how do I find out what Bluetooth chip it has? But why would I even want to know what Bluetooth chip it has? Well, the reason I want to know is because I want to know whether a given device is vulnerable to over-the-air, firmware, chip-level exploitation. So in the past, starting in 2018, that was our first instance of a just send a magic packet, low-level link layer, BLE packet, pre-authentication, nothing about that pairing stuff you may be familiar with in Bluetooth. Nope, all pre-pairing, just send a magic packet, get arbitrary code execution. Texas Instruments, 2018. Xeno Labs, from researchers from TU Darmstadt in Germany, they found vulnerabilities like this in Bluetooth Classic, LMP, the link layer of Bluetooth Classic, in 2019 in Broadcom chips. And then in 2020, my wife, Xeno Kovah, she presented at Black Hat US her findings in Texas Instruments and also Silicon Labs chips. So again, magic vulnerability, send a packet, get code execution. Now, it's probably worth saying that Veronica is a former NSA capability development specialist, and she doesn't just, put out there, I found a vulnerability and it's probably exploitable. No, she put out actual proof of concept, run arbitrary code on these particular chips. But here's the thing, we couldn't make a big hairy deal about it because we didn't know what the impact was. What devices are running these vulnerable firmwares? We don't know. And ever since, I've been trying to figure that out. So for the purposes of this talk, there's Bluetooth Classic, BC, and properly this is known as BR-EDR, but that's the old original circa 2001 Bluetooth that existed before Bluetooth Low Energy. That's the more modern version, released in 2010, and I'll refer to that as BLE. And then BTidalpool. If you hear me say BTidalpool, that is the Bluetooth device address. That is the proper name. You'll often see it misreferred to as a MAC address. Sometimes it behaves like a MAC address, but especially in Bluetooth Low Energy, most of the time it doesn't. So it's not a MAC, it's a BTidalpool. So the talk is about Bluetooth printing. And so the code is already out there, released in 2023, but just slowly, with my 25% of my time, improving things since then. So what's Bluetooth printing? Well, it's Bluetooth tooth printing, right? And there's the definition for you. And why tooth printing, not fingerprinting? Well, you wouldn't fingerprint a tooth, would you? So data collection can take a variety of physical forms. How do you collect the information necessary for tooth printing? So you can start with a random laptop, and you stick some dongles and stuff attached to it, and that's the most convenient way to get started with things. And this is how I teach a class that I'll talk about later on. If you want something small and inconspicuous, then instead we have the simple just get a Raspberry Pi and get a battery. Now, that can take a small form factor like this, smaller than a phone. This is what I use when Veronica yells at me for taking my big box around because she finds this too suspicious. So that's your inconspicuous version. But if you just use the built-in Bluetooth, this happens to be a Broadcom chip on these, if you use the built-in Broadcom, you are limited in terms of your capacity to send low-level packets. That's just an architectural design feature of Bluetooth. The host, the operating system, the Linux, is not supposed to be able to send the lowest level packets. That's why we introduced dongles where we're running custom firmware that let us send any packet we want. Obviously, prerequisite for doing things like sending link layer exploits. And there's our Bluetooth Printing Pro Max Extreme Edition. This is big and unwieldy because specifically this dev board, ESP32-based dev board, the researchers who did the work that I'm building on here, they released it only in x86-64 binary tool, so no source code. So I have to run it on x86, which means I have to go get a small form factor x86, which isn't meant to be run off batteries, so then I have a voltage adapter and everything else. But that gives you your full capabilities, but it's pretty expensive. So literally right now, I'm trying to get rid of this annoying dependency so that I can just take an off-the-shelf Realtek dongle and replace that and run it on a small Raspberry Pi for days instead of 12 hours with this box. All right, and the reason I put these things up here, not just visual aids, it was to remind me to unplug them as I talk, because there's an interesting property of Bluetooth that if you're doing a bunch of active scanning, like I'm asking all of your devices, like give me your data, that can make it so that it's sort of a low-grade DOS and it stops me from connecting to your devices. So we'll see if I do the connection demo at the end, if I have time, but I need to stop those things from being so noisy. So when it comes to the Bluetooth stack, we have in Bluetooth the notions of hosts and controllers. Hosts, we'll just think of like it's a normal operating system, Windows, Linux, Mac OS. Controller is the Bluetooth chip. And I said that architecturally, there's these lower level packets, link layer and link manager protocol. These are meant to be abstracted by the host controller interface. So there is a spec'd out way for the host to talk to the controller and say, please tell me the name of the remote device. And it shouldn't care about the exact like LMP name request packet. They should just say, please tell me the name, and then the link layer figures out how to translate that into a lower level packet. So that's where we all have types of protocols and types of information. We ideally want to collect everything from everywhere, but where do we actually collect today? It's a subset of that. So these are all the things. Link layer, using these extra dongles, and some of the higher level protocols. So plenty of work here to do still. All the new stuff in Bluetooth, we're not going to go over that. This is just go read it later on if you care. Again, it's my 25% time to keep improving this. What we're talking about today is the things that enable the crowdsourcing. So specifically, that's going to be clues, which is UUID identification, BTides, and BTidalpool. So starting with clues. Clues is the custom lightweight UUID exchange schema, and it is a JSON schema where I've defined how to collect information about universally unique IDs, UUIDs. Bluetooth uses lots of UUIDs to identify services. What are you trying to talk to? What can you read? What can you write? Those are given names of 128-bit UUIDs. Now, clues is a standalone repo so that other people can just I stripped this out of my main code so that other people could just use just this part, because just this part by itself is super useful to every other Bluetooth tool in the world. So the way that UUIDs are used in Bluetooth is that the Bluetooth SIG, the special interest group, the spec organization, they've reserved some things, and they say these are our UUIDs. These are well defined in the spec services, and everything else is just vendor, go do what you want. Make a random number and call it your service. So right now, I have about 500 high signal-to-noise UUIDs and counting, but we definitely have thousands and thousands out in the wild. Now, I say high signal-to-noise because, although clues is a schema, I also include some just clues example data. This is, again, what would be useful to other projects to use. There is a number, that UUID, which is associated with a company, Nordic Semiconductor. It has a particular purpose, which is device firmware update, and the name I gave it was legacy. They call it legacy device firmware update. I call it insecure firmware update because it's basically a over-the-air firmware update capability that had no digital signing capability, which means architecturally anyone can send anything and say, please update your code to run this. So architectural code execution. If you see a thing with this magic number, you're guaranteed to be able to run code on it. And me, I'm a big cites or it didn't happen, so evidence array. You can go out and Google, search on GitHub, and you'll find all sorts of UUIDs, and it says this UUID is that name. Very, very important to me. We need some actual documentation. I believe the documentation is what separates us from the animals. And so I don't want to just say someone somewhere said that this UUID is this. I want to say here is an attributable source. It's also on archive.org because these links break all the time. Literally, as I was building this, one of them for Amazon stuff disappeared, and it wasn't on archive.org. So off into the ephemera. So I want to walk you through just a couple examples of using tellmeeverything.py. This is sort of the main interface to the information that we scrape all this information, we shove it into a database, and then we pull it back out in some sort of human-readable form. But it's human-readable, with an asterisk, because if you just jumped in right now and tried to use this would be like trying to read the super low-level details of how nmap OS fingerprinting works if you didn't know what TCP/IP was. Okay, so I don't claim that this is something that you can just jump in right away, but I'm going to pull out a couple of little things, and then I'm going to explain how we make this actually usable and actionable in the future. So I picked a random device. This particular device, I said, let's back up a sec. What's my goal again? My goal is to know what chips are in devices. Are these devices that I'm seeing out here vulnerable to our over-the-air exploits? So this particular device, I can see it's got Nordic Semiconductor. I see it's got this magic DFU service that indicates it's probably vulnerable. But I picked this one because there's another data source that I can pull from that's called BLE-scope. BLE-scope was some academic research where they basically went and scraped a bunch of Android packages, and then they extracted UUIDs from calls to Bluetooth APIs in Android. And so they basically could say, all right, this particular Android package for this particular company had that UUID in it. So it's just a big mapping of UUIDs to packages. It's getting a little old and stale at this point. We need to refresh that data. But with that data, the fact that it says LoRa star, and this data, the fact that the name is a smart U, then you just Google it. And what do you get? you get a Bluetooth ironing board. I don't know why that exists. I don't know what the Bluetooth adds to the ironing board. That was just, I'd literally never seen this. I just picked the first thing that had BLE scope data, and it was an ironing board. Cool, but what can we learn about the ironing board beyond that, right? Other than the fact that it's vulnerable to the Nordic chip that it's using. Well, there's all this stuff. This is, see if I do that. Nope, doesn't make it big. I'm not going to do it. OK. This stuff, too complicated to talk about for now. This is GAT, the generic attribute profile. But this is like kind of the meat of Bluetooth Low Energy. It is the interfaces to services. So we'll talk about little bits and pieces, but I can't go through all that. But the next information that's relatively easy to understand is SMP, Security Manager Protocol. This is the pairing stuff. When you think of Bluetooth and you think of pairing, that is managed by the Security Manager Protocol. And so, oh, there's my Nordic thing. So down here, one of the things that I can extract from trying to pair with the device is that it does not ask for secure connections pairing. There is an old form of Bluetooth Low Energy pairing that is now called legacy pairing. But basically, between when Bluetooth Low Energy was introduced in Bluetooth 4.0 and then 4.1, they only had this legacy pairing. And so Mike Ryan, back in 2013, basically said, hey, you're doing a pairing, you're exchanging PIN numbers and stuff like that. But it turns out it's just easily architecturally brute forceable. So those 6-digit pins could just be trivially brute forced. If you just watch a pairing, you don't even have to try 1111, 1112. You just watch the pairing and you win. So they're always architecturally vulnerable. Then they introduced in 4.2, here's our new secure connections. It looked much more like Bluetooth Classic. It's using elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman. So it's still vulnerable potentially to active machine-in-the-middle attacks, which is what they have another security bit to deal with, whether you're asking for please protect from machine-in-the-middle, or whether you're just saying, nah, it's good. I'm good with being machine-in-the-middle. But yeah, so legacy versus secure connections pairing. If you don't ask for secure connections, an attacker can always downgrade you at pairing time and say, or they can just watch someone else, like two entities that are not the attacker, watch them pair and then decrypt their subsequent communication. So just kind of easy stuff that we can pull out by doing an active query. All right, now I promised a little bit for the people who do care about things like tracking and privacy. I added this in here because an EFF guy was asking me about the privacy implications of automated license plate scanners collecting Bluetooth stuff. So those things that watch people's license plates as they drive by. Some companies are also introducing Wi-Fi and Bluetooth scanners into those. And so the EFF guy wanted to know, what are the implications if those companies can see your Bluetooth devices going back and forth? And it's a whole big deal to talk about that privacy threat model and what your assumptions are. But the key takeaway from that discussion was, OK, if people care about privacy, they have no tools to figure out whether or not their devices are trackable. So I added in this unique ID potential trackability report where basically I'm exposing if there are any known guaranteed unique IDs or things that are not going to be changing about the device. So this one, for instance, has a random static BD adder. That's, again, one of those types of BD adders that doesn't look like a MAC address. But basically, it's an address that never changes. So, of course, you could be tracked by that. It has a name. It is a name that never changes. You could be tracked by that. And so for those of you who care about that kind of thing, you can look at that stuff. All right, another just couple quick examples of where we pluck out the stuff I'm interested in. Silicon Labs right here, some magic random UUID. And within the GAT information, we have a little more semantically interesting stuff. There's a name called Magic Band, and then actually there's a company ID called Disney Worldwide Services. So if you haven't had the chance to head to Disney World, the Magic Bands are this. It's a little wearable watch thing, and it's actually a sort of access control device. It gets you into things. But the particular Silicon Labs UUIDs that I'm seeing here, this service that I'm seeing, I've added via the clues database. I want to be clear, you wouldn't know that this magic number is a Silicon Labs over-the-air firmware update interface unless you had something to tell you. We have to collect, as a community, information about what things are. Otherwise, we're just left Googling things. And sometimes, straight up, there is no Google hits for things. That's why we do things like extract out of Android applications or reverse engineer, opaque binary firmware. So anyways, Silicon Labs, cool. You go look it up, you find out Silicon Labs has an architecturally secure, signed, digitally signed firmware update. So great, that's secure, except that back in 2023, some researchers presented at hardware.io that they had found an exploit for the secure update process for Silicon Labs. So although this says secure boot, these particular Silicon Labs chips do not enforce a signature at every boot. They only enforce a signature at update time. Send an update, check the signature, it's all good, go ahead and flash the update. Well, send that update, that malicious attacker-controlled input, and maybe you exploit the update process and take control, and now ever after, because they don't have secure boot, you have persistent code execution on the flash chip. So, but how do we know? Is this vulnerable to that particular exploit or not? We don't. We don't, and that's the problem. We don't have good ways to find out and do vulnerability assessment for offense or defense on whether or not any given vulnerability applies to any given device. Sometimes it falls out easy, but most of the time it does not. And then this was mostly just a curiosity thing. I was wondering why I see Amazon Alexa on this thing, because as far as I know, they don't have speakers or microphones. But you Google it, and you find that there's some sort of Amazon Echo with Mickey Mouse ears that's available in Disney resorts. And so that says, like, oh, I see you're back because I see your Magic Band, and so let me tell you about your agenda for the next day. All right, final example. Here's a Texas Instruments one. We go, we dig down. We have some good information on this one. This is some of that GAT information telling us model number, serial number. We've got some names in here like Aruba and HPE Aruba, so we might be able to infer that it's probably something like an Aruba Wi-Fi access point. And then down here, we see that the specific UUID that tells us it's Texas Instruments is once again one of these over-the-air firmware updates. Just harping on over-the-air firmware updates because if anyone wants to do some good research, there's a whole bunch of problems with over-the-air updates in the Bluetooth ecosystem. But I told you that the ARMIS folks back in 2018 found the first ever over-the-air arbitrary code execution in a link layer pre-auth packet. Well, because they're the sort of VC-funded place that makes the logo bugs, they bundled together two bugs. There was a stack overflow, if I remember correctly. I can't remember if it was stack or heap overflow. And then the other one was just a logic bug in the firmware update. Specifically, these Aruba access points were built on Texas Instruments chips. They were using Texas Instruments firmware update. And essentially, they said in the vulnerability disclosure, what it boiled down to is a security through obscurity thing. Texas Instruments gave people an architecturally vulnerable firmware update thing. Aruba, to their credit, tried to do a little better than that, but not that much better. They tried to implement a security through obscurity thing. Poke a magic value into a magic one of these particular characteristic values, and that shall open up and unlock your capability to do a firmware update. So that's the kind of security through obscurity, which is just going to fall to reverse engineering. But at least it wasn't just, straight up everyone can write to a bog standard Texas Instruments firmware update thing. Well, the vulnerable devices were ostensibly these, and I can check the model string, and it's not one of those. So that's kind of a best case scenario today for finding out whether existing vulnerabilities apply to a particular device. All right, so I said that tell me everything interface is way too much information for just someone coming into it from no background. But I don't want to dumb down the interface. I want this to be useful to Bluetooth researchers. So instead of dumbing down the interface, I've decided to smarten up the users. So just this last week, this past 7th of September or whatever, I released my open security training class, Bluetooth Reconnaissance via Bluetooth Printing. And so you can go there now, and you can take that. And it takes, on average, about 8.5 hours. But I say on average because I like to show this kind of thing, because I want to acknowledge that everyone's a special and unique snowflake, and everyone takes a different amount of time to take classes. And this is something that is very ingrained in my head. When I try to teach a class, I have to teach to the average, to the median. And it's always guaranteed to be too slow for some and too fast for others. So, you can go out and maybe it'll take you 16 hours and maybe it'll take you 5 hours. It all depends on your particular background. Now that this is released, we can put out sort of our future plans for Bluetooth classes at Open Security Training. If you see a white box, that means we have no particular instructor lined up. Slash is partially filled in blue means it's under development or reserved, and blue means it's developed already. So that class that I just showed you is Bluetooth 2222. The Bluetooth reconnaissance class, and it's coming in around 8 hours. It's released. I have a smaller mini class, just a helper class that will help other classes, a couple hours, telling you about how Bluetooth and Linux works. What are the default things? What's BTMon? What's Bluetooth control? What's HCI config? So just give you basic Linux stuff, because that'll help you in the other classes. But basically, Veronica and I have developed a whole bunch of content on Bluetooth protocol stack itself and all of the security vulnerabilities and everything therein. So basically, you can already take this as like a paid training. Veronica is like very dutifully working on like making the videos right now back at home. I'm sure she's not like slacking off because I'm out of the office. But we're estimating that this is going to come in around 24 hours for just the like bottom-up approach to the stack. What is the link layer? What is HCI? What is L2CAP? So basically, this will give you the information you need to know at every single level of what's the protocol and what kind of things do security people care about in the protocol at that level. What vulnerabilities have there been in the past? And then the way the classes are going to end, and we've put this to separate classes, is one way you can end the class is you can say, OK, cool, I want to go make some packets. I want to just prove that I know the protocol by writing the packets. And that's great. That's a great way to learn. And the other way it can end is you can either A, learn how to create packets and then go to vulnerability hunting, or you can skip directly to vulnerability hunting. So if you already know what buffer overflows are and race conditions and use after free, if you already know how to hunt for vulnerabilities, we've taken the Zephyr RTOS. Zephyr is basically the Linux Foundation officially blessed RTOS. It's the Linux of RTOSes. And we've reverted the patches because Zephyr RTOS has had plenty of Bluetooth memory corruption vulnerabilities. Just send a magic packet, exploit Zephyr RTOS. So we went and we reverted those patches back out. We give you an ultra-vulnerable Zephyr, and you can go ahead and do audit through that. And it's a good thing where you know and you're guaranteed that there are bugs there for you to find. You just need to find them. But you may find that the code quality of Zephyr is such that you're just as likely to find a new vulnerability as you are to find one of the old ones that we've actually reverted back. Because some of those vulnerabilities that we reverted back were actually found by previous OST2 students. So I have separate classes on vulnerability hunting, about 40 hours worth of material, and this is material that I originally developed internally at Apple to teach the developers, here's a Stack Overflow, please don't do that again. Here's a heap overflow, please don't do that again. When I left Apple, I went and re-implemented those classes using real CVEs. I don't know why anyone would learn from a CTF when you could learn from real CVEs. Like, why do you want to look at fake bugs? That is literally a waste of your life. Sorry, I don't want to rant about this. But the reason you do that is because people don't want to put the effort into teaching you about real CVEs. I'm teaching you about real CVEs, dozens of real CVEs, fresh CVEs. Go learn real CVEs to learn vulnerability hunting. Or if you're a person who needs to skill up your developers so that they stop, again, it was originally made for developer education because it's the same stuff you teach to a would-be vulnerability hunter and a secure developer. Anyways, that's some that OST2 stuff. So my ulterior motive behind all of this, to be honest about it, is that I'm putting together a crew, a blue crew. And basically, there's more work than I can do in the rest of my life in Bluetooth security. So even if I just work on this 100% of the time for the rest of my life, I'm not going to make a dent. We need more people working on Bluetooth security. So we're teaching classes to make more people capable of doing this. And so I'm putting together a crew, which essentially you can think of it like a hacker crew, or I prefer to think of it more just like an academic research group. It is a virtual academic research group, which you can opt into rather than having to pay thousands of dollars to a university. You can pay me in accomplishment. You come in, you take the classes, you learn about Bluetooth. I point you at specific known open problems that need solving. You solve the problems, you get to continue. You do conference talks. It's win-win for everyone. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, always the problem with a new researcher is they don't know what's impactful. They just say, I don't know, I'm going to go do this. Well, I can tell you, I have literally blue crew to-dos in these classes. We have like dozens of things you could do immediately that would be impactful. All right, back to our regularly scheduled Bluetooth stuff after that brief diversion. So clues is collecting information about UUIDs to give us additional semantic information that helps us know things like vulnerabilities just straight up. Magic arbitrary execution capabilities. BTides is Bluetooth Information Data Exchange schema, and it again is a JSON schema. The goal here is essentially we need ways to ship information about Bluetooth devices around. I want to do information sharing amongst different tools, and I want to do information sharing amongst you and I. So it collects a superset of the kind of stuff that you can get in PCAPs and HCI logs. So there are two sort of common formats that one would collect Bluetooth information in, but they're actually like non-overlapping. Like you can't get all of the information from just a PCAP or all of the information from an HCI log. So BTides gives you all the information. And more importantly, when I'm thinking about how do I create a crowdsourcing thing, I don't want to be shipping around PCAPs. You know, the world's history is rife with parsing vulnerabilities for things that are complicated like PCAPs. So the situation was there were 0 computing standards. I need to get in at the start and develop one standard, although that's arguable. So the basic point is essentially the tell me everything interface to Bluetooth printing will export BTides data. It is in a schema that we can sanity check so we can make sure if it's valid or not. We can safely parse it in memory safe languages like Python. We send it over to other tools, and if they know how to import it into their storage, whatever their storage is, then great, they're good to go. For these HCI and PCAP formats, we can convert those to BTides, and if you just did that one import script, great, you just now for free have HCI and PCAP import capability. And then also you can export stuff from some other tool, give it to me in BTides, and I can import it into mine. So that brings us to BTidalpool, where I would like to pool the world's BTides information. I'm the blue moon controlling the push and pull of the BTidalpool. BTidalpool is basically just a MySQL server with a little Python script. There's one Python script for Google single sign-on authentication because I don't know how that works and I don't want to deal with that. I'm like a firmware guy. That's too high level for me. So I will admit that I vibe coded it up. I don't know how to write that kind of code. The LLM made me some Google single sign-on code. Hopefully it's good. Feel free to audit it. But basically, Google single sign-on, so I don't have to keep anyone's passwords and have them leaked or anything like that. So you create a throwaway Gmail account, and you're good to go to access and download the data. And most importantly, I've shared my data already. Like, I would like you to share your data, but I've shared my data. So in 2023, when I was running around to a bunch of conferences telling about Bluetooth printing, I went and sniffed a bunch of data from a bunch of conferences. So I've sniffed your data from this conference as well, and your data will be conveniently available after the conference via BTidalpool. If you want to go out and literally don't even install all this hardware and stuff. Just open up your phone and go to the Bluetooth section and then figure out which name is yours and then query BTidalpool and see what it says about you, right? All right, well, the quick start is that there's 2 chunks to Bluetooth printing. There's capture and there's analysis. So you don't need the capture stuff to get started with BTidalpool. Just clone it, go install the script, run a shell script to install all of the analysis stuff. That's like install MySQL and stuff like that. And then you run the tell me everything, query BTidalpool, and something. There's a bunch of UI. So time for live demos for that, I guess. And now, just like I don't know how to, oh, there's some more of your data. Let's cancel that. Yeah, never mind. So nothing up my sleeve. I like to use aliases just because I don't like typing command line arguments. So I'm going to type things like tell me everything or TB to get to the BTidalpool. So I'm going to pick on flippers because I've seen some people with flippers in the crowd. Flippers are trackable, first of all. Flipper doesn't care about your privacy. And even if you tried to fix the things you can fix, they would still be trackable. Anyways. So basically how it works, is that big enough? Let's clear. So tell me everything, -- query BTidalpool, -- name regex, and flipper, just to get all the flippers. And then I want to get a little, there's too many. So I want to, and I don't want to hit the server for so many things. So I'm going to sub-select down to just the ones where I have the better, more detailed information, the GAT information. So require GAT values. That means I got all the information off a device. So it asks you, please sign in. You go to your throwaway Google account. You say, yes, I'm cool with doing single sign-on. Check the privacy and terms of service first. I'll tell you straight up, architecturally, I don't have a way to delete your data. If you ask me later on, please delete my data. If you ask me for a specific BTadder and you say, hey, this is my trackable personal computer that's called, Sven's MacBook, I could remove Sven's MacBook for you, but I don't have an architect. The database schema is not good enough yet that I can say Sven contributed this and I can delete all of Sven's data. So read those terms of service. It says when you contribute, it's public data forever thereafter. Anyways, then you get a token, and again, I don't know how that kind of stuff works. I just expect that it works, and I know there's supposed to be a way to just auto-feed it back in, but I just copy and paste, or you just put it in a file, and there's a -- token file, and then you use that instead. That's the correct way to do it. So anyways, there's some of that tell me everything information, and so let's pick on whatever this first one is. So up here we have Flipper. Flippers use the name Flipper space random name, your dolphin name. It is, first of all, using a public BTadder that is a non-rotating trackable address. It's static and never ever changes. And ostensibly, when it's a public address, you should be able to infer the IEEE OUI, the organizationally unique identifier. In this particular case, it's using an OUI that is invalid, whatever. So we can go down. So I'll just go to the privacy report. So it's using a public BTadder, so it's trackable. It has a serial number interface. So even if you change the BTadder manually, because you can't do it easily, even if you change the dolphin name manually, because you can't do it easily, go look at some of my previous presentations. I have a link to the forum post where they talk about how this is a known issue and they haven't fixed it for years. So even if you changed all that stuff, you'd still have a serial number that I could query and know where you are. So yeah, flippers don't care about your privacy. Yeah, I'm gonna, well, no, let's, I don't know. Should I take requests from the audience in terms of, I don't know, that seems dangerous. I'm not gonna do it. I'll just say, I'll just give a quick, notion of there's capability. I could say GPS and stuff like that. So I want to be clear. I think I moved it to the backup slides, but I'll mention it anyways. I am concerned with what a device is, not where a device is. If you're familiar with other crowdsourced war driving type tools like Wiggle, Wiggle was originally a Wi-Fi stumbling, sniffing, war driving type thing. Wiggle eventually added the capability to do Bluetooth as well as Wi-Fi, and then cellular as well. So Wiggle is all about geographic database. The Wiggle people run around and find where all the Bluetooth devices are. So if the Wiggle people saw you here, and I'm sure there's someone contributing to Wiggle here, they will send all this data up to Wiggle. They'll say this GPS, and then if a Wiggler walks by your house at some future point and they track your Flipper device to your house, then we'll know that hacker conference person lives there. So I have the capability to import databases from Wiggle into this to basically just make the data a little more interesting, enrich the data. That's the word I was looking for. Basically, sometimes I want to know where a device is rather than just what it is. There was recently a news story about some crosswalks in Silicon Valley got hacked. It was basically most likely just a default password, but some crosswalks had a Bluetooth interface where you could upload audio files to put what's the word for multiple language? Localized versions of the, please walk signal. So anyway, someone uploaded some deep fakes of Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk saying silly things. But I wanted to know, okay, do I have any of those devices in my local area? And for that, I had GPS information of something I had sniffed. And then I went there and collected all the information about it. And it's uploaded, but I don't remember what the names of those were. Otherwise, I would show you right now. All right, good enough for now on that. Yes. So anyways, the high-level view is basically BTidalpool is 2 Python scripts with a MySQL database running on a free Amazon instance, which is very easy to knock over. Please don't, it's easy. BTidalpool just sends us down BTide's data, puts it into your local database to merge it with whatever local data you've collected. You don't have to send your data up. Just collect your local data, analyze it locally. But if you send it up, then it can be pulled down elsewhere. And so Tell Me Everything always outputs human-readable information as well as BTide's information. And so all this really is, when you use the -- to BTidalpool, is send it up to the local AWS database. All right, final point about an example of like why we need this sort of crowdsourcing going on. I said that the original sort of motivating factor for this is that we didn't know where Veronica's exploits were applicable. Recently, in June of this year, there was some work by ERNW folks, Dennis Heinz previously at TU Darmstadt, the folks who had done the other Bluetooth Classic exploit, although he didn't do it. It was a different person who did it. Anyways, they had found vulnerabilities in Bluetooth GATT services associated with Aeroha, which was used in a bunch of headphones. So what they ultimately found was that amongst the capabilities that was just there and architecturally available, like if you know how to speak this thing that is not documented publicly, then you can read the RAM. You can read keys straight out of the device, and most importantly, you can read and write flash. Again, that is an architecturally guaranteed, no authentication capability to get arbitrary code execution on these headphones. Great, so they found a vulnerability. They had no idea where it applied. They have no idea how many people, you know, us security people like to say, this affects 1 billion devices, even if we don't have any evidence, like the ARMIS people like to say. So nobody knows for real how many devices are affected by any given vulnerability, but you can try to say, like, you know, okay, at least tell people which products are affected by this vulnerability, but you can't even do that most of the time. So what they did was they went back and they, you know, bought a bunch of things that they thought had this. They asked friends and family to contribute Bluetooth devices to find out. And this is the list that they ultimately came up with that I believe they actually proper confirmed with hands-on, with active querying, because it turned out like the UUID for this particular service is available on some other devices that are not vulnerable. Like strangely enough, it's available on like some Apple Beats headphones. They don't know why it's there because Apple doesn't use Aeroha chips, but it's there and it wasn't vulnerable magically. So anyways, these are the devices they found, but from that, you know, where else is it vulnerable? So the interesting thing about this research was that it was essentially a partial disclosure. It wasn't a full disclosure of the vulnerability. They also, you know, they blurred the particular UUIDs that were, this is the UUID where it gives you arbitrary code execution. But here's the thing, with this crowdsourcing capability and with this list, like before the slides were even available to this, they put a blog post out and it had this list of here's the affected things. So what did I do? I just went into BTidalpool and I started searching for these things. So this is left as a, they still haven't disclosed what the UUID is, by the way, but this is left as a example for the audience here. So name regex, let's say like one of those 1000 XM3s or something like that. Is it 1000 XM3? Yeah. Ooh, let's get that -- token file. I already copied the token file. So I go out to the BTidalpool and I just start looking for names of these devices. And I pull them down, and then how would you figure out which one is the vulnerable one? Well, you've got all of these service UUIDs. They are unknown at this time. Like, I don't know what that is. You don't know what that is. But you just go device to device, and you find the Venn overlap of which UUID exists on all these devices, and there's your vulnerable guaranteed flash write arbitrary code execution. Of course, you have to go off and reverse engineer the headphones and stuff like that, but you know, that's trivial, right? It's trivial with open security trainings. All right. Anyways, like I said, partial disclosure. They still haven't actually disclosed what the thing is. And what I really want to highlight is this picture. Like, I recognize this picture from my previous life of UEFI ecosystem. This is a fundamentally difficult to secure ecosystem. in a world where we've got many different chip makers. Like this picture is only one of many different chip makers. Take another 20 diagrams like that with many intermediate vendors, a bunch of things called module makers in the middle, a bunch of products. There are over like 3,600 individual companies registered to the Bluetooth SIG today. This is an ecosystem. Again, part of the reason for my desire for a Blue Crew is because I can see an ecosystem that I can't fix in my lifetime. This is going to take a lot of people. If you want it to be secured, maybe you don't want it to be secured. Up to you. Anyways, in conclusion, let's see, did I have another point about that? No, I didn't. In conclusion, all we know about Bluetooth is that we know nothing.
Xeno, do you want to take questions?
Do I have time? No, I have like 27 seconds. Again, the minor point is that we will be releasing a bunch more Bluetooth classes. We want more people to know about Bluetooth. I want people to know what I know so they can go off and secure things. That's the actual thanks for listening. Oh, and I guess because, nope, hold on. And the one last thing is, because documentation is what separates us from the animals, I do have to put this plug for this little wiki thing that I have here, where if you want a sorted, semantically tagged list of all of the 300+ Bluetooth talks from the last 24 years, you can go here and go read all of those, like I have. Click on any given one, and you'll find something that's semantically tagged, talking about what the attack surface is, who the authors are, what conference it was at, when it was, and all that good stuff. So documentation, big fan.
Right, well, there you go. That's your homework. There's quite a lot of it. Xeno, where are you going to hang out later?
Yeah, so if you'd like to ask questions, since the next talk is immediately thereafter, I will be there. I think I was going to say something like, if there's any Nordic people, like not Nordic people, Nordic semiconductor people in the audience, I'd really love to talk to you. I'm going to be over there watching the next talk over from that corner.
Yeah, we're like, this is like Nordic Semiconductor Anonymous, so you can kind of like show up and just be like, yeah, man, I'm not going to expose myself, but it's our fault. Cool.